Colonialism, Civilization, and African Encounters in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. The history of colonialism is torn between two extremes, one of which is laced with the stench of the loaded language of civilization and rationality, the other of which fights daily in academia to dissolve such concepts in an elixir of lucid, first-hand colonial experiences. Today, the former position still frequently prevails, partly because of how easy it is to mistake intrusion for beneficence when it is presented so craftily. As such, it is of critical importance in dismantling colonialism and its history to understand how seemingly benign notions like civility are developed and weaponized, as Achebe shows in prose, to subjugate those who find themselves facing colonial encroachment. The very idea of colonialism is met with a far more critical eye today than at the outset of the colonial project, particularly because the lack of foreign encounters in European societies allowed for the binary rhetoric of civilized-uncivilized to be readily accepted as a defense mechanism helping establish a national identity. In desperate need to survive in an increasingly conflictual European environment, national identity in the form of race, class, virtue, and country was crafted to maintain social cohesion, leading to rhetoric that necessitated an outgroup against which to find one's ground. Superior races have a right because they have a duty to civilize the inferior races. The concept of conquest was covered with the veneer of progress and civilization to promote Europe to send out its people to civilize your new-caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. The very universality of civility brought with it the universality of a blanket presence of expansion and terror. In Things Fall Apart, we are presented with the Igbo people, complete with their vital religious and cultural traditions, many of which form an interconnected web across tribal lines via the unificatory power of religious traditions that connect vast swaths of people via ancestral lineages. Just as quickly as a crime is committed, an implicit yet nevertheless present ruling is there to siphon Okonkwo across the semi-permeable membrane of tribal boundaries and mobilize his place of residence to his maternal ancestral land. This social milieu lends itself well to a communitarian lifestyle in which one remains at all times cognizant of the forces of the earth, compelling one to partake in practices that blur the line between mere superstition and effective tools for social cohesion. While these complex cultural systems often go unrecognized by European onlookers, who are all too willing to forsake civility in their own discourse in exchange for unscrupulous generalizations, they are presented by Achebe in all their richness, complete with notions of justice, which sew together a tapestry of individuals unified by the common identity imparted by nature's underlying unity. Far be it for crime to go unnoticed in these primitive societies. It was a crime against the earth goddess to kill a clansman. Injustice was an attack against the divine order, in a manner not too dissimilar from conceptions of criminality and virtue as it has been upheld by Christianity. Punishment was not mere happenstance, but was requisite and ritualized as the very lifeblood of the Igbo people. A large crowd of men from Ezeudu's quarter stormed Okonkwo's compound, dressed in garbs of war. They set fire to his houses, demolished his red walls, killed his animals, and destroyed his barn. It was the justice of the earth goddess, and they were merely her messengers. They were merely cleansing the land which Okonkwo had polluted with the blood of a clansman. When confronted with customs such as these, it becomes increasingly difficult to uphold the dichotomy between the savage, born in a country which he runs over but can scarcely be said to occupy, or the civilized man, who comes to introduce into this unproductive country the industry which supports life. Playing out atop this backdrop of interwoven and rich practices, the initial moments of the British presence in Igbo land are met with apprehension and often scoff at the arrogance of the missionaries. There was a general consensus at the outset of the first missionary appearances that the strange white man would break their clan and spread destruction among them. Indeed, while many European sources may mark Africans with passivity, deeming them the silent, sullen peoples, Achebe's portrayal of the Igbo response to missionaries was far from passive, with many on high alert against a mad dog that had come to eat it, Umuofia, up. As the missionary presence became more pronounced, the missionaries found themselves constantly at odds with a foreign culture whose gaps they were all too eager to fill in with Western presuppositions, such as when they asked who the king of the village was, but the villagers told them that there was no king. "We have men of high title and the chief priests and elders," they said. This cultural lag between two, contrary to establishing the inferiority of the Igbo, or the disparity between the civilized and uncivilized, acts as a possibility by which the Igbo, through discourse, can explain the similarities between their cultures and, indeed, their religions. Such is the case when, in response to the missionary Dr. Brown's critique of the Igbo's usage of wooden idols called ikenga, which is deemed still a piece of wood, Acuna explains that the ikenga act like messengers, serving as a medium between their god Chukwu and the material realm. As the two engage in a theological debate, already testifying to the supposedly impossible presence of intelligence and oratorical ability in African people generally, it is shown that in fact their religions follow a rather similar structure. Your queen sends her messenger, the district commissioner. He finds that he cannot do the work alone, and so he appoints Kotma to help him. It is the same with God, or Chukwu. He appoints the smaller gods to help him because his work is too great for one person. In presenting us with the raw reality of both the intricacy of the Igbo culture, as well as the sudden appearance of British missionaries, Achebe forces us to come to the realization that the supposedly benign notion of civility, uncivility is in fact laden with cultural prejudice, which not only interferes with intercultural communication, but paves the way for destructive colonizing mission. In presenting a rich encounter with the addition of the oft-forgotten African perspective, Achebe gives us a chance to reflect on the problematic binarization of humans into supposedly humane categories. As a result, we are faced with the sudden realization that when it comes to civilization, things fall apart.